So I go when it's off? When it turns on again?
It's on right now.
Okay,
We'll
okay.
Okay.
I'll be sitting here going, which way was it?
Anybody gonna sit here? Come with maybe you want to.
Bless me, Father, for I sin.
Gotta keep him under control.
Here we go.
It already flipped.
Oh, it flipped. Hello, I would like to call the January 13th, 2010 workshop between the Town Council and the Board of Education to order. And I'm going to call the order of the Town Council. And I'm going to start with Sean Babine.
Present.
Judy Roy.
Here.
Councilor Wood.
Here.
Councilor DeAndrea.
Here.
Councilor Holbrook. And is Councilor Alquist in the room yet?
He's out. He's
He
here
was
somewhere.
here, okay. And Brian, if you'd like to take attendance of the school board.
For the board, Mr. Mitchell,
Present.
Ms. Perry,
Here.
Mr. Brownson. Here. Mr. Zavolio, here. Ms. Stasko is absent, and Mr. Cole is absent, and Ms. Wiseman is absent.
Okay, thank you. And we have other guests here with us this evening. We have our town manager. We have our superintendent, David Doyle. We have our assistant superintendent, Joanne Sizemore. And we have our finance director, Ruth Porter. And we have a representative from our auditing firm. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over for the presentation of the audit to McDonald and Page.
Okay, thank you. My name is Christian Smith. I'm a director at McDonald Page. So we're here to give you an overview of the financial statements and the audit, and certainly answer any questions that you might have. So right now I'm just going to go through the slides that I handed out that are bound together, and just go over some things that are required to be discussed, and then point out some individual pieces of information within the financial reports that you have in front of you. Just so everybody has an understanding of what the relationship with the auditors is, we are independent auditors, and we work for the council/school board. We work with management to perform the audit, and our responsibility essentially is to express an opinion on the financial statements that are ultimately the responsibility of management. So there's a clear line there. The next slide just covers, it's just a listing of the different reports that we've issued. We're not going to go over each one of those, but just so you're aware of what some of the reports are that we issue. The first item is what we call the SAS 114 letter, or it's a letter to those charged with governance, which is you as the board. Not going to go over that letter at all. I think Ruth has handed you out a copy of it. It's a four-page letter. Just to let you know that, what we've issued is the standard letter. If there were any issues over accounting principles or the performance of the audit, things of that nature, they'd be identified in that letter. So it's more or less a boilerplate standard letter, so there's really nothing to go over there. And some of the material is covered in the slides already anyhow. So we also issue a management letter, one each for the town and one for the school. Of course, there's the financial reports, a separate report for the town and for the school department as well. We issue a single audit report and data collection form that's discusses compliance with federal laws and regulations over federal grant money that both the town and school have received. There's one filing for that. We also have to issue a report with the state of Maine. They're basically checking up on us to make sure we've done appropriate audit procedures, so something we have to comply with them. And then a couple more reports for the school. The school has to upload financial data to the state of Maine. It's called the MEDMS report. So we look at that and audit that and tie that out to the financial statements and ensure that that's accurate. And then also determine that the school has complied with the Maine School Finance Act. So and all of those have been submitted submitted as required. So the first thing I thought we'd do is just go over the management letter for the town. It's a 2-page letter, and it's headed to the town council.
That was sent out with the audit materials. I have a few copies here. I can certainly make more copies if you don't have that with you.
It was in the
It's
bound
right here.
book, right?
No, it's not in the
it's
bound
separate,
report.
right
It's a
here.
separate.
I thought I read it.
Yes, that's right, it did come with
Yeah,
the
I
agenda.
remember reading it,
materials.
but I don't know what I did with it.
I do have 3 or 4 copies here.
Yeah, if I get it, buried mine.
I'd just like to note that Counselor Alquist has joined us.
So, okay, I'll just going to go over, just to give you a kind of an overview of what it is that we need to do when we write a management letter comment. We have to basically assess the items that we find. There are 3 levels of severity when we write a management letter and find items to comment on. The highest level is what's called a material weakness. The next highest level is a significant deficiency. And the lowest level is what's called a controlled deficiency, or really just a best practice recommendation. So anytime we find an item, we need to use our judgment, as well as comply with auditing standards to determine how to report it. So the very first comment we have here is regarding an item that we identified over the recording of expenditures and accounts payable. And basically, anytime we find an item that requires an adjustment that was not identified by management, it's automatically an indication of a weakness, of a lapse in internal control. And so once we find that item, we've got to look at it and, well, is it material? And we have a calculation that determines materiality. So in this case, this was one invoice out of, we probably looked at 20 or 30 of them related to this specific test, and one invoice that affected the town capital projects fund that wasn't recorded in the year June 30, 2009, and it should have, and it was for $408,439. So by definition alone, that amount is considered material to the audit. So in compliance with the standards, it's recorded as a material weakness in internal control. So we've identified that item, and we've provided a suggestion or recommendation to have an additional step be performed at year end, to have another person independently review the checks that are cut after year end to make sure that they are in the right accounting period. So, that's what that item is. I don't know if there's any questions on that at all. It's really it doesn't affect the general fund. It's an accounting timing issue, really, is what it boils down to.
I don't know if this relates, but on the school side, come out and say our capital projects had been closed out for years. Did your audit cover any of those issues on the schools? Well, I guess it's from the town side. And, we're going to talk about later on that we got $400,000 of unclosed capital projects that should have been closed out, recorded through the town side a long time ago.
Yeah, well, we've kind of talked about it. I think I've talked about those kind of things with Kate. I think some of them have extra surplus balances. Yeah,
Right.
it was part of our discussion, but there isn't anything,
You had no
necessarily any
recommendation
finding.
As a control solution or anything on that?
No, that's not something that we had really come up with, no.
To my understanding, that's really, the CIP budgets and accounts are in the town side,
School control.
but the bonding is obviously in the town side. And I just think both areas need to figure out how to work together going forward to close them out on an annual basis, and I didn't know if the audit was part of that whole.
Right, we look at those funds, but that wasn't something that we really had identified.
I just want to point out, attached to the 2-page letter that Christian's going through, Ruth and I did provide a response to each and every one of these items. Further information if you're interested.
And it is, it's entirely up to, management in terms of how these items that we've identified are addressed. It's management, certainly management's discretion, as well as with your guidance as to how to address them, or whether to address them at all. So, we're simply pointing out what we notice.
Thank you.
So the second page just covers 2 other comments, which are really kind of lower level comments. Part of our normal procedures, we review town procedures and controls. Our objective really is to issue an opinion on the financial statement. So we're not at all required to look for or identify these items, but we do happen to find them as we do the audit. And we do like to try to add some value to the audit and try to identify items, whether it's, policy improvements or procedural or efficiency or otherwise, we do like to do different procedures and look at different areas each year. So, we couldn't possibly look at every area every year, so we try to pick several different areas each year to look at. So this year, we spent some time at the police department and looked at their procedures for recording payroll and identified a difference in how overtime pay was being calculated. What was being done to calculate overtime pay did not coincide with the labor agreement in place. So we've had discussions with management, the police department, and Human Resources about it as well. And our understanding is the intention is to modify the labor agreement so that it matches up to the current practice. So it's our understanding that the practice being performed was always the intended and desired result. It's that the labor agreement hadn't been updated to reflect that.
I assure you, if we were underpaying our police officers or any other employee, they would have made that abundantly clear to us.
And then the last comment just regards, we looked at the billing practices at the rescue department and found that they hadn't updated their procedures in a few years, and there were some procedures were quite outdated given the procedures and the electronic submission of forms now. So, in that, it's important to have updated procedures in case someone has an extended absence. You want to make sure that someone else can pick up the job and move forward pretty quickly.
You made a comment that you looked at some things, obviously not across the board. Did you look at other contractual payments other than the police, like within the school side? Or?
Right, no, we didn't. I mean, we have an intention next year to look at, at least one or two others next year. And we looked at payroll to the extent it related for the school, for federal grants, but not necessarily in the same depth as what we did here for the town. It was a different purpose. So I don't know if there's any other questions on the management letter for the town.
It does say here, though, next year you do, in addition to other things that you might look at, you also look at these items specifically to see what.
Yes, we'll look to see what the resolution of the, it's worth mentioning too, that the comments that we had identified last year have been, were corrected in the current year, so.
That was my next comment.
Yeah.
So you don't see a repeat of last year.
Right, exactly. Yep, yes.
The only one that may repeat has to do with that police department one, because it's contractual, and I don't remember when the contract expires, so it may not get resolved until the contract is renewed.
I see. Okay. Well, you could do a midterm bargain, right, then that would.
And then that's not, I mean, if
I like that.
if we know it's in process, it's not something we necessarily would write up again, so, given the circumstances, so. The next slide, while we're on the topic of management letter comments, I figured we'd go and just talk, now we're switching back over to the school. There were no management letter comments for the school this year. I believe, if I remember right, all the comments last year had to do with the student activity funds, so those have been corrected as well. There is one item to mention which doesn't get reported in the management letter, but it gets reported in the single audit report, which goes to the grant oversight agencies. There was an oversight of not documenting payroll in compliance with the requirements for the special education grant. Basically, they require a certification for all full-time employees that's done twice annually, and there was some confusion as to what was required, and so we pointed that out and reported it, and I understand it'll be fixed next year as well.
It's fixed now.
Fixed now.
Could you just go into the in-depth of what special items you looked at in the school versus in past years? Because I wasn't part of this process in the past year. High level.
Well, we look at the expenditures and, our budgetary controls in place. That's something we would do every year.
We're looking at the special, I know when we have audits, like you said, every year you kind of look at it differently. What were the key areas within the school you looked at this year versus what you did in the prior?
Right, I guess, well, it would have to do with the federal grants. We looked at the Title I, the local entitlement grant is being required to test as a major federal program. And the prior year, it wasn't tested at all. We weren't required to test it. So that really would be the biggest area. And then the stimulus money that will certainly be tested next year, because most of that hasn't been spent at this point. So I know that'll be different next year, and we would have tested that this year had they spent a majority of it. But other than that, I mean, with the school, I think, it's going to depend year to year. I mean, there really wasn't a lot of capital projects activity, so we really didn't didn't dig into there a whole lot. It's going to depend, but everything else that we do is, I'd say, standard from year to year in terms of looking at the balance sheet accounts.
There was no material, obviously, issues, and there was no even minor issues, so to speak, that we should be notified of.
Yes, correct,
So it's
yes.
a pretty good process, okay?
The next slide, we're only going to go over selected pages within the financial statement. So this is just really for your reference, just so you know what's in the financial statements. It just gives you an overview of the different pieces of information that are in the financial statements. So, really, the financial statements are 128 pages. They're really not designed for the general public. They're designed for, the financial markets, the bond rating agencies. They're the ones that really have driven this volume of information. So, what might be of most use to you would be to read the management's discussion and analysis. That's pages 21 through 32. That's supposed to be able to provide you with an overview of where the town stands. Are they doing better or worse? What are the issues? Without having to read the whole financial statement and without having to have a full knowledge of auditing, or not auditing, but accounting principles. So if you have the reports in front of you, we're going to go to a few individual pages. So the first item would just be to look at our auditor's report, which starts on page 17 and finishes on page 18. What everybody desires is to get a clean opinion. So what we've issued here is what's called an unqualified opinion, which is a clean opinion. So that's what everybody strives to get. So that basically means that these financial statements are presented in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. Just turning on to the next slide on the presentation, just going to point out what is new for this year. And I'm trying not to go into too much detail on it, but Government Accounting Standards Boards had a new standard this year which requires that all governmental entities, all municipalities, record a liability for the cost of allowing retirees to participate in the town's health plan. And so there's an actuary that was hired to perform a study and come up with a calculation.
That was a waste of money.
So the town's liability was determined to be $2.7 million. This does not affect the budget to actual at all, because your budget to actual financial statements is on a cash basis, a pay-as-you-go. So this is only on the government-wide financial statements. It's deemed to be a future liability, or I guess I'd say it's a future cost that's being borne by allowing retirees to stay in the health plan, even though they are paying 100% of the premium. It's a calculated liability. So I think this is something that the bond rating agencies are going to start looking at. The next slide, just to briefly explain what's going to be new for future years. There's some changes in how fund balance is reported. You currently report designated and reserved fund balances. Those terms are all going to change, and now there's going to be 5 categories of reservations or reserves, designations or reserves, all with different terminology. Probably the one thing I did want to point out, and it's something that I'll have to work with Ruth to understand and plan ahead for, is the rules are going to change in terms of what is part of the general fund versus what is special revenue fund. So there's an unintended consequence where some monies that might be reported as special revenue fund are going to have to be presented in the general fund. So you can still reserve and designate money, but you just can't segregate it out from the general fund. So that's just something that we'll have to work with Ruth on to make sure that we've identified any of the funds that are going to have to change reporting requirements for the financial statements.
Can you give me just a high-level general idea what some of these items would be?
Yeah, and I can't think of any examples where it would affect a school department, because they typically don't operate in the same manner that a town does. But the best example would be where a town has fund balance reserve policy, and you say anything in excess of that, we're going to transfer over to let's call it a stabilization fund for, a rainy day fund for future tax use. What the standards say basically is that you can still designate it and say that money's available for that purpose, but you can't take it out of the general fund and kind of, hide it, if you will, in the special revenue fund. It has to come back in the general fund, so it's right there in front of people to see, because there's really no external resource that's coming in. It's merely an internal shifting of funds, really.
I always thought rainy day funds had to be disclosed in the financials anyways, I mean, as a subset of a surplus account.
Well, it depends. I have towns that every year they move hundreds of thousands of dollars out of the general fund and put it in a capital projects fund for, a future building, or they put it in special revenue reserve for an ambulance purchase or a fire truck purchase. So those types of funds in the future, they can still say that that's the intended purpose for it, but it just can't be segregated in those funds. It's got to be part of the general fund balance.
And so it would just be earmarked.
Be
so to
earmarked.
speak,
It would still be earmarked, it's just not,
So for a
broken out.
capital project, which the town charter is 450, so we could actually, or is it 4? Okay. Four, okay, 450, round numbers. The town could actually put money into, quote, specialized funds as a separate segregation of surplus, and then when you go to the town voters, that would theoretically, they're voting on a dollar figure, knowing that X amount's already in the in the surplus account, and Y would be out of the tax base. Is that how it would be disclosed?
It's really not a function of the budget, I guess. There's budgetary considerations to take into account depending on how these funds are treated, but I'm really just talking about what we're looking at for the financial statements in terms of like where is it reported? Is it in the general fund or is it in another fund? And that may be, when we look at another one of the pieces of the parts of the financial statements, that might be a little more clear.
So, I'm sorry, I need to understand that better. So if we have, because we're thinking about and talking about at the council level about having a rate stabilization fund. So all you're saying is that when you calculate your general fund reserve, that you have to include that rainy day fund as part of the calculation. That's all you're really saying. You can't hide it, it can't be.
It's
separate.
part of the just part of the general fund, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you can still call it and say, we've made a determination, this is what it's going to be used for, but it has to stay, it can't just be off to the side where it's, not in front of you in the general fund, basically, yeah.
But now on the school side has a surplus, quote, balance.
Mhm.
Is that designated at all? That's still just, from accounting standpoint, that's still just one number?
Yeah, that's still, little would change there, really, because that's all still within the general fund for the school, and it's basically been earmarked.
Earmarked, you lost me on that one.
Well, it's
Really not earmarked.
well, it's been voted that it's going to be used for a
Oh,
purpose.
Okay, it's on your balance sheet as historically voted for some expenditure of which we haven't spent it on.
Yes,
Gotcha.
yes, yep.
Okay.
The next slide, just wanted to point out, show the trend in the change in budgetary basis fund balance for the last 3 years. And this really correlates to page 72 of the financial statements. So if you want to turn to page 72. So for the year, we're talking about the town, just the town here, well, the town includes the school, but on the town financial statements, there's a net decrease in fund balance of $213,476. So you can see that on the chart with the light blue bar that shows a negative number. So, what I wanted to point out here was that, that it's a negative number, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. The thing that you need to understand here is if you're looking at page 72, you can see that towards the bottom, there's a line item called utilization of prior year surplus and carrying balances of $1,799,837. So as the budget was voted, you were legally authorized to spend, basically spend out of fund balance by about $1.8 million. You actually only spent $213,000 out of fund balance. So you really did better than was originally budgeted. So that's actually a positive variance from how it was planned. And if you were to look at the prior 2 years, you'll see on the slide, you'll see that there was a surplus in '08 of about $720,000. Well, in that year, you had voted to use about $1.3 million of fund balance, but you didn't have to. And the year prior to that, there was about $590,000 in surplus or revenues over expenses, and in that year, you voted to use $1.3 million of fund balance. So, in each of these cases, we've performed better than budgeted.
Okay. When I was looking at this page, I got lost, but when I think of a balance sheet as of end of fiscal year '08, what was our surplus? Isn't that the $1,067,000?
Well, that'd be, your end-of-year surplus would be the far right-hand column, the very last number, 8.9 million is your total fund balance. So you had 8,974,492.
At the end of '08 was, okay,
That was the end of '08.
okay, so then the '08 carry forward balance is, what is that?
Well, it's 8,974,492.
The million, in your line you were
Oh,
talking,
I'm
the
sorry.
utilization prior year surplus and carry balances, the $1 million.
Okay, okay, yeah, well, some of the prior year numbers aren't all presented on here, so if you were asking, I'm sorry, so you were asking about the 2008?
Yeah, I mean,
Carry
I'm
forward.
looking at, okay, we started with a surplus of 8.9 million.
Yeah.
And you say you're bringing forward, carry forward '08. That $1 million represents what? Very first column.
Okay,
799,000 of it was budgeted use of fund balance. We didn't
Okay.
need to use it, we ended up only needing 213,000.
But what is the $1 million, I guess?
Well, I can tell you 800,000 of it is
It's,
fund balance that we expected we would need to run the school and town operations for that fiscal year.
$1 million is purchase orders authorized in 2009 that didn't liquidate until 2010, so those carry forward. Some of the monies are capital projects that are bonded that we don't,
This is '08. It says
She
08
means
carry
08 to
forward. Okay, you
09.
mean 08.
oh, no.
Yeah, she means '08 to '09.
08 carrying into 09's
Right.
fiscal year.
yes.
Yeah, for Tom's point, we put in a budget, 800,000 of the carry forward that we're going to use, and it was in the budget. Right, the
Yeah,
799.
I don't consider that carry forward. There was a conscious decision as part of the budget process.
Right.
To use a portion of fund balance,
Right.
School and town.
school and town.
So we used, yeah, well, that's what gets me, because the school, I thought, used 850.
I think that's next
I
year.
think that's
That's
current year,
2010.
2010.
Oh, that's at the end, of that, gotcha, okay,
No, that's
So-
not reflected anywhere on this
Right.
material.
That's
That's in the current year budget.
okay. I guess I'm still tied up between the million and the 9 million. Can you just put it in?
Yeah, I think, well,
The 9 million is my surplus balance. so
the
that
9 million is all general fund monies that are available,
Right.
everything.
Designated, reserved,
Yeah, everything.
undesignated, school,
That's the
town.
surplus on your,
Yes, yep, so when you're, talking about total surplus, that's that figure, and as Ruth said, what's in that 2008 carry forward column, those are the unspent purchase orders that, that are authorized to be carried over and used in the next year, and basically that's
unspent stuff.
unspent,
You
yep.
budgeted 800, so you got a total of 1.8, gotcha, then your actual runs out at,
And the expenditures for those 2008 purchase orders actually get spent in this fiscal 2009.
Right.
So that's why, if you don't show the carry forward, you look like you overspent your budget.
okay, gotcha.
Turning to a different page in the financial statements, page 69, just a couple pages back. So this is some of the things we were just talking about, so, under the 2009 column, towards the bottom, the fund balances. So you can see that the total general fund balance is about 8.8 million, and you can see the different components. There's some money that's reserved, some money's designated, and basically we were just talking about the $1 million carry forward. That 1,818,000 carry forward is essentially a lot of that number, and some sick time designations. And then you've got the undesignated piece for school and town. So when you're looking at your fund balance, there's several different components of what's available to spend and what isn't.
So shouldn't the school side, the 1.8, be our surplus as of 7/109?
Yes, yep, we'll see that on the school's financial statements.
We have, David, that we utilized 850 for this year and had a 507 balance, that's like 1.3. Where'd the other 500 go? Bruce, can you help me out on that one? Right, maybe. Because we utilized this year 850,000 of surplus, it was in the budget from surplus. And then I thought the balance was 507, what I call the 7-1 balance. Yeah, right. And we had 850, well, it's not in here, 850 went into the budget. So I would have thought the 850 plus the 507 would be the number we would have ended up here, so let me show you this. Ruth, does that make sense, or?
The only thing is that 500,000 may have been unaudited numbers, so once the final audit was done, that number may have changed. Unless are you talking about the school's financials?
Yeah.
I have them here if you want to take a look.
Yeah, because I'm thinking what Kate had provided, and I think is part of the future discussion, that our 7-1 balance after rolling some surplus into this year's budget was 507. And my understanding, unless we're missing, that we rolled 850, utilized final approval of council board was 850 into this year's budget. Let me just find that sheet.
Well, it's certainly confusing. You're considering multiple years here, and I'm sorry, I
you
can't
also have
follow
to-
your math.
I'm just using, Tom, the ending year here, which,
You need to remember the 450 CIP that got rolled in there too.
oh, that's in this guy. That's in the 1800. Okay.
Yeah, That's
I mean, the
the
1.8.
guys that did that roll.
Okay,
Thanks.
okay.
Thank you.
That's my balancing item.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just talking the ending, Tom.
Let's see, okay, so
This guy.
moving on to another page, page 37 of the financial statements. I think I've got mine mixed up here.
850 plus 450 plus 5, 18, so. It does add.
Pages fell messed up. So all I wanted to point out here was just that there are, we're pretty much focused on the general fund, but there are other funds that the town has, obviously. So here, this just shows, you can see the different types of resources that are there, and the fund balances for each one. There's a general fund, and you can see the 8.8 million in fund balance there. There's a performance bond fund that's listed on this schedule. Basically, none of that is your money. The general town improvements is capital projects money, 997,000 of fund balance, and that's got a specific purpose for that. Higas Parkway Fund is presented here, is about $1.4 million in that fund balance. And then the other governmental funds is just everything else. It's town grants, school grants, other smaller capital projects funds that aren't reported separately. So just so you can see that there are, there's reporting of every fund that you have available. And for the most part, anything outside of the general fund, it has a specific purpose, and that's generally true. Just so, back to the slides again, and just a couple of other pieces of information. And this, just some revenue source trends for the past 3 years, and this correlates to page, you can find these numbers on page 70 of the financial statements, but, so just so you can see where, property taxes have gone for the last 3 years, you can see that there's been an increase there of about $2 million a year for each of the last couple of years. And then the slide after that just shows the other 3 more significant revenue sources, so you can see the state education subsidy, how that number has trended, and actually, it is presented, it looks like an upward trend, but you have to remember that in 2009, that this number includes $781,000 of federal stimulus money. So, absent that, you would have had a pretty significant shortfall in that category. And
No,
that's going to continue, well, that source is gone for the future, I understand, so. And, well, excise, it's not as noticeable on the graph. Excise taxes was about 4.3 million in 2007. Now it's down to about 4.1 million. And of course, that's expected to trend downward in the future. State revenue sharing is, marginally changed basically over the 3 years. So just so you could get kind of an idea as to the more key revenue items.
What are the major items that make up state revenue?
State education subsidy?
State
Or-
rep-
No, state revenue sharing.
Oh, the state revenue sharing? I'm not sure that I know what that
That's a
is.
state formula that includes population.
But what does it go towards? Is it earmarked or is it
It's
just general?
earmarked to reduce the property taxes.
Okay, so it's general to the towns and
I'm not
cities?
sure if some monies for public works or road maintenance is included in that. There's some much smaller sums that you're might be shown there as well. But I just want to make the point, if you look at the slide that Christian was just talking about and then flip back to the property tax, not surprisingly, when you have your non-property tax revenue sources flat or declining, the revenue has to come from somewhere, and it hits property tax. We also, I should have encouraged you to put a slide in of tax rate. We haven't seen the same sort of climb of rate, but we have seen certainly a climb in receipts, property tax receipts.
I wanted to ask a question. I don't know, Tom. Do you know what the breakout on the property tax slide is, business versus residential? Where were we in 2007 and where are we now?
Just percentage-wise trend?
Yeah, is it 75-25, 50-50?
It's trending in the upward direction in that commercial industrial is picking up a larger share, but it's by percentage points, not
Right.
huge gains. And it's in the order of 21%.
The business portion is 22, 21, 22.
We have an internal goal of reaching 25%.
That's what I was driving to, how close we are to that goal.
I assume the increased valuation trend has declined over this 3-year period?
Most certainly. In modern history, our valuation change year to year was in the order of $60 million a year. New growth and higher assessments and so on and so forth. Last year was $38 million. We expect the
That's
trend
like-
to continue going down.
With a zero tax change, that's like $300,000 or $400,000 swing then, right? Roughly.
You can do the math better than I can, but
It's a substantial number.
it certainly is.
Yeah, right. Okay.
That annual growth in value has afforded this town and the school and town operations
Right.
to fund a lot in the next year without any effect on the mill rate.
I think historically, that's probably the biggest thing that's added tax dollars for different, whether it's schools, municipal, is we've added, basically $750,000 years ago per year, with no change in tax.
Correct.
Just because of the growth, and obviously, 9, I'm assuming 010 and 011 is gonna be a much smaller change in, tax revenue with no change in mill rate per se. I mean, you're not gonna have a $60 million increase in valuation this April, I think.
Certainly not.
The next slide shows, I think this is the last item I have on the town side, but it is the school. I thought it would be useful just to see, education, the education department, school department is the largest category of really any municipality, so where did we stand compared to some other municipalities? And so this is just a selection of some of the other top 10 communities in terms of population, based on what was available to me. I mean, there's others that you could compare to. But just to see where you came out, so it's showing that as a percentage of the total municipal budget, the school is about 52% of that. So that's, it's pretty much in line with the other communities. I think with Portland, they're just so big, their budget's so big, that's why it's a smaller number, their
You wouldn't
overall
have-
budget.
When you look at like our social and economic makeup relative to our communities, I maybe South Portland, the other towns I wouldn't necessarily put as moving to Scarborough versus moving to Portland, or moving to Scarborough versus Biddeford, but, more like Yarmouth, Cumberland, Falmouth, Kennebunk, Cape Elizabeth. Do you know what those
I-
more socioeconomic
I
compatible
don't,
bases are?
those weren't all, they're not all available. I mean, definitely, open to whatever information you feel will be useful in the future to change the presentation, so.
My personal view is when, I would think when we're hiring, when people are moving into this town, I know from my employment, when people come in from out of state, and we give them a list of towns, and we certainly don't put necessarily move into Portland, you don't necessarily move into, somebody, you're looking at Scarborough, Cape, Falmouth, Kennebunk, Greeley, Yeah, maybe Gorham, yeah, I think, but so those are what I think the population of Scarborough is really comparing to when people move in here. They don't compare to buying a house in Scarborough versus buying a house in Bar Mills.
They also
Or
have
for that matter,
significantly
Portland.
lower budgets, though, too. They also have significantly lower total budgets, too. So it depends on how you look at it. I mean, I
But
guess I'm not trying to,
I
It's
think
more
you're right.
discussion for the council and school, because when we, from the school side at least, we try to compare where are we in our competition of where people look for, moving for educational purposes, and we don't really compare to Portland necessarily.
I think,
Maybe-
it's apples and oranges, and putting Brunswick in there, and I think you have to factor in the BNAS, leaving, and I think there may be some major adjustments relative to Brunswick and the population
Right.
too. So I agree with you. I look more at Cape and Gorham and Westbrook, it as a better
Yeah.
comparison if I were somebody moving into the community than Portland or Biddeford or Brunswick.
Right.
The other thing I just observed, beyond the demographics, I'm not sure how demographics would necessarily be meaningful in this analysis, but certainly the age of the communities, all these others are older communities, more urban. I dare say have probably an older set of school buildings and such. We've just been forced over the last 20 years or 25 years to put massive amounts of investment in our education system.
That's what Tom, I would say like Cumberland, Yarmouth, those, and Kennebunk and Cape have more of a social age distribution closer to Scarborough than certainly Portland, South Portland, and some of these, that's why, and I know from my standpoint, when people move in, when we hire somebody, we don't give them a list of, here's your, here's a real estate firm. These other towns aren't necessarily on the list, so.
Stay on task.
I asked Christian the same question. It's really availability of data. He
But
had
my
access
point
to
for
it.
the pun is, when we talk about percentage, I bet you those other towns have a much higher percent of school expenditure than what these comparisons does. Yeah.
I think that's fair. I mean, what we're hearing from community members too is that the distribution of percentages for our community compared to the folks, the communities where we're performing close to them academically, or certainly, as Bob has already mentioned, the distribution percentages is certainly.
I just bring that, not only from the school, but just literally moving into a town, this is the wrong comparison.
Thank you.
so now we're on to the school's financial statements. I don't know who has a copy of the school financial statements, if it's just the school board or if the town does as well.
No, we have them too.
Okay.
You don't, Sean? Do you have one of the school? Okay. Okay. Oh, didn't mean anything, okay.
Smell the wood.
So the next slide just kind of is the same summary as was with the towns, just so you have an idea of what's in the financial statements. These are a little different in that, we don't present a management's discussion and analysis. It's a little less complicated because the school department technically, we do issue a separate financial statement, but it's not a legally separate entity. So the accounting for it is a little different. So just kind of pointing out some key things in the school's financial statements. Page 1, and it's our auditor's opinion. And here again, we've issued an unqualified opinion or a clean opinion. So there's no exceptions in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. And then just moving on to the next slide, this correlates to page 4 in the financial statements. This is the school's budget to actual results for the year. So you can see here in the budget, in the chart, that in 2009, there's a surplus of $805,000 for the year, which is significantly higher than the prior 2 years, but, as we mentioned before, that about $650,000 of that is the stimulus money, federal stimulus money. So that money was not spent, it was held back for next year. So that's really the key change here. And then kind of like we discussed with the town as well, I mean, in each of these years, there was a voted use of fund balance that wasn't necessary. So in 2009, it was like $390,000, and next year, that figures the $850,000. that's been talked about, so. And I think the last thing to cover is just looking at page 2, just so you can see the different funds that the school has. The school has, the general fund balance of about $1.8 million. Special revenue funds, those are all the federal grant funds, and then the capital projects fund. So you can see that, the special revenue fund, capital projects fund are all certainly specific money that's available for specific purposes.
Any questions or comments? Counselor Babine?
Just one question, or kind of pick your brain and see if you have a recommendation. The council's finance committee is talking about its undesignated fund balance, and I believe our policy today says that we keep a minimum of 112, or about 8.3%. Over the years, it's been recommended that it could be as low as 5%. It's been recommended it could be as high as 25%. What's your recommendation?
Well, from who I've talked to some people at the bond rating agencies, and as far as I know, what they look for, the standards haven't really changed that much, but basically your policy, the 1/12, which is 8.33%, that's what they don't want to see it any lower than that. And then I saw an article in the paper recently where the city of Portland, this was back in March or May of 2009, where they were talking about their fund balance reserves and what the rating agencies were looking at. And at least in that article, they got a downgrading rating because their fund balance went below 10%. It was down to about 8%. So they got ratcheted down a notch for the rating agency. And in that same article, it also talked about anything over 15% was considered to be too much. So, really what you're talking about is the impact is, what are the rating agencies going to do with your bond rating for future bond issues? And it'd really be best to talk to someone in that industry, because and there's other factors too, I think. But that's one of the things they do look at.
Diana, holding a flat surplus does nothing from a bond standpoint. It's a management process of how you utilize it, don't utilize that in times, because if you hold 8% and you hold it and you never spend it, or you never go above and below, like, it's no different than holding 0 or 100%.
Well, those are the guidelines.
You look at the management process, the town process of why did you spend it, why did you build up in a certain time period, and why did you spend down as far as the rating, quantitative. I just want to make sure, because if you hold 8 forever, and can never use it, or if you hold 15 forever, it's no different with the management process.
My conversations with the rating agencies, one, they're most interested in having, whether we have a policy.
Right.
Certainly we need to have one, and then two, you follow it. And our thresholds seem to meet their needs at this point.
Any other questions or comments?
One comment on
Mr. Mitchell?
going through this from when I was on the board years ago, and your presentation is in great shape relative to where I thought we were years ago, so I thank your firm and glad the town.
Sure.
Folks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Well, I want to thank you very much for coming. I also want to note that Board Member Stasko has arrived and is here. So I think what we'll do is take a little break, 5 minutes, and then we'll come back and start the other part of our workshop.
Leave these here. I think I've got my notes.
Okay, this is phase 2 or part 2 of our council school board workshop tonight. And basically, our purpose in this section is to discuss the financial standing of both the town and the school department at this time, and discuss curtailments and revenue changes, and what the impact those are going to have on the continuation of this year's budget and next year's budget. I want to say that this is a workshop for the council and the school board, but if time allows, I will allow comments from the audience at the end, but I'm not promising because we don't want to be here too late. It seems like January has given us an awful lot of meetings, and we're going to try to stick to a schedule. So without further ado, we're going to start to have a review of revenue sources, and I'm going to turn it over to Chairman Delolio to start with the school side.
What we thought we would do was kind of give you an update as to the curtailment, what has come down, and then walk you through in your packet some of the things that we're doing to address that curtailment.
Excuse me, Brian, just, if anyone doesn't have an agenda, we have extra agendas, I meant to say that.
Send a handful down.
There you go. Thank you.
And so, Bob Mitchell from our finance committee is going to walk you through the sheet that looks like this, to kind of give you an update as to where we're at.
If somebody have the final form to make sure I have the right one. I have like 5 versions of, that looks like the number I had, yes.
Can I remind you to speak up louder, because they said the mics were not picking up well, so make sure that you're speaking in, so,
Or we pull it more toward you.
okay.
My voice wasn't heard?
Well, it's softer.
Hard to believe, huh?
And you need to,
Okay. I guess we'll, everyone has this page, and effectively, as you know, in the middle, in the late fall, the state has reduced the allotted fiscal year '09 budget and has reduced Scarborough's town allotment for education anyways by 1.1 million. So obviously, given that budgets are kind of locked in, or we're not going to go raise any more funds, so we're trying to figure out from a finance committee and a school board where that 1.1 million adjustment is. And what this piece breaks out into, I think similar to the town, the superintendent has put basically a freeze on expenditures with, going through a high level approval process, whether it's for additional field trips, et cetera. We've tried to reduce as much as possible. We have not put into a plan right now for a reduction in staff in the current year, but clearly, obviously, when we get into next year, that's obviously a big issue. Breakdown through, these are savings relative to the actual budget figures. Teacher breakage, which I think most people know, when it's budgeted, there's various step levels, and then if you hire differently, that's pretty much once you've got the employment, assuming you don't change employment after September, which is in general for teachers, there's a difference between the person that we hired versus what we thought we hired, and that difference is 100,000. And if you look historically over the years, it's somewhere plus or minus right around that number. So that's part of the reason why historically we have some surplus and we bring it forward to the next year. So that is also in our current books right now. Basically, finance director went through and said, is everybody listed in the budget? Obviously, we don't have those exact people when we hire. This is the difference between what we hired versus a person that was in the original budget. We put an estimate of what the average new hire would be.
Okay.
So an example,
I just need a definition of the word breakage. I don't.
Judy, you need to put that mic closer to you,
Savings,
too.
let's call it savings. Difference between
Okay.
budget and best estimate of actual now. So I call variance of actual to expected.
Okay.
Expected being the original budget. Yeah, breakage is kind of a school term, I guess, because I'd call it variance for actual expected.
The Councilor Wood wants some more clarification, I think.
Yes.
so in your example, you're speaking of like a teacher that might have retired at a high step level and then replaced by one that's not quite.
That's correct. That's correct. Yeah. It's basically, if you think of it, the biggest, you know what the salary is now because everyone's on staff, you know what's in the budget, do a
You budget
comparison.
for that and then.
Right, okay. Same thing, staff support, administrative, gone down through the whole piece. Property and casualty, very small amount. Some of these more get into estimates, and if there are detailed questions, I guess, our maintenance manager is here. And, these aren't guaranteed. I think that if you go from top to bottom, the teacher's breakage is pretty much more hard fixed than when you get to natural gas or some of these others which are not hard fixed, but our best estimate will be relative to what we had in the initial budget. We have also, as you know, we've started a process of where can we start saving on funds, and we did a couple of things at last board meeting. We have modified our sports offering beginning this spring, which will change from budget of $28,000. We've also taken off half of the board contingencies. So all total, that's a $275 for savings relative to budget. Second thing is not listed, those are the kind of like big ticket items, or at least identified clear ticket items. The next one is more of a soft item, and this is from the administration driving just literally from all the various areas, from reduction in paper, electronic, classroom essentials, teacher travel, conferences, a whole list of just what I'd call classroom / other types of curtailments that were just, was in the budget, whether it's buying additional library books or things, have just been basically reduced as much as possible. And there's a process that to go out and purchase anything has to go up through the ranks to make sure that we really have to have that for the current educational. So we estimate that at $250. That's a range number, of course. Again, nowhere near as concrete as like the teacher breakage or staff breakage. Okay. The next item is basically potential revenues, and this gets back to the difference between the audit report and what we had. As I brought up when we talked about CIP funds, the way the CIP funds, the council over the years approves a CIP project for X dollar figures. Those are bonded over time, then expenditures are made, and what was occurred in, I'm not sure the exact time frame, but I guess sometime in the fall, sometime before Norm Justice left, as he was leaving, we finally worked with I believe, Ruth's side and to clean up, to look at what's the difference between all the historical actual approved budget amount. Some of these accounts had been closed, projects had been closed, I mean, not like the high school, but small bonded amounts. That difference had already been bonded, so under the process, if we had, example, we had a budget for a roofing of $100,000, let's say, and we actually bonded and got $100,000, and then we did the whole roof for $75,000. There's $25,000 of surplus, because we've already collected the revenue off of it. We've only spent $25,000. So that is, it would go into surplus. At the end of this year, it would actually roll into our surplus balance. That's how much was identified for various historical CIP closeouts, because they had been bonded, but we were no longer, obviously, we only spent the $75,000, my example, and we finished the roofing project, so gone. There's an extra $25,000 that has gone through because the council of the board has already approved the $100,000 expenditure. We only spent $75,000. That's 451, and there's a whole list of, you can get the individual items.
has a question.
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to this, obviously, that's why I'm asking now. Is there any issues whereby the voters go to approve a bond for a specific purpose, and they approve a $100,000 roofing project, and the project is completed for $75,000? Is there any obligation for the town to put those monies back in?
I'll answer, and then I'm sure David can
Okay.
correct. Because if it was $100,000, a lot of it obviously didn't go to voter approval because it was just council approval because they were below a level. But under my understanding is that, yes, it has to go towards debt service. So the extent that we utilize $450,000 in the current year to go towards debt service, now obviously our debt service is 4 point some odd million, the total budget. So this, quote, technically goes towards funding that debt surplus. Some other $450,000 goes to funding, quote, the operating
I
budget.
see, okay.
So yes, it does have to go to a debt service, but our debt service is already big, but it's obviously not compared to the size of the operating budget. So that's it.
Good answer.
Okay. And we have gone through and made sure that that's okay from accounting and from,
Advised by our attorneys that that's the way it had to be used.
Yeah,
Right.
and it seems wise to me to reduce debt service.
Give you money back that you didn't use, not
yeah, that's what it says, it's
Right.
using to go towards
Right.
debt interest costs.
Makes sense.
Okay, the next one is Medicaid revenue. Again, this is an estimate. Obviously, these have ranges, policy, MEMIC policy dividends, small amount. For total, that whole category, obviously, the biggest component of that being the CIP closeouts, what I would call closing out a prior CIP fund. So that's roughly another $500,000. Okay, then we also, obviously, you look at, and every year, we're going to have some lines that are going to be above our original budget. First line is food services. I think the school historically has been slightly above a break-even budget. The board at the last meeting voted and approved unanimously a rate increase, which will be implemented for another 5% increase in food costs that we'll be charging. And we can get David will have the steps of what a breakfast or lunch at the different K-2 schools. That will raise about $25,000 and that will be effective sometime by.
As soon as we get approval from the state.
Right, we have to file out everything, we just can't go out and raise, we have to get state approval, which I don't believe that will be an issue, but so hopefully, we estimate that will raise approximately 25 and a half year, obviously 50 towards next year, or actually maybe a little bit more. That said, we probably still could be 50,000 shy. We're trying to manage that too, that account can get down to zero, but we have 50 in there. Substitutes have been running higher, and that's kind of, that we're trying to manage that, but obviously there's a flat fee for substitutes. We've had higher substitutes than what we've had in the budget, so we're running short on that figure. I've got fuel transportation as a question, and I'm sure we can have a discussion on that. It looks like it's trending down, but there's absolutely no guarantee on that one, so I don't have a quantified number on that yet, but we'll continue to update that as we move forward. But it looks like, obviously, fuel costs have trended all over the place over the last 5 years, but it looks like that won't be at least a deficit, but we could have some potential, but we don't have a quantification. Unemployment based on, we've actually had slight increases in cost that we have to pay on that, but it's a small number, so all told, what we call the potential shortfalls from line items is 160,000. So you add up all those and you get total identified funds of $1,037,000, less a curtailment of $1,129,000, less the shortfalls of 160, gives us a remainder of still a 252,000 balance relative to coming up with solving the 1.1 million reduction. So that's where we are right at this point. Okay. And part of the goal is, obviously we've looked at a lot of things. I mean, obviously it's already come out now, the sports program. The Finance Committee discussed everything from small items, whether, without cutting staff in the middle of the school year, we've looked at everything else, and I think the administration's tried to reduce the cost as much as possible. We have looked at some other, like the art show coming up, it's 10 grand. At this point, we've kept that in the process. I'm not sure where all those things will be. Everything's got to be relooked at for next year, because once we go into next year, this year's budget or adjustments is nothing compared to what will be occurring next year. So I assume, I just want to lay those things out, that we're trying to look at every outside item and reduce it as much as possible. Obviously, the school budget is 70-some odd, 75%? Somewhere in the 70% range of salary plus benefits, in other words, body-related. So there's only so much modification you can do without affecting actual positions, whether it's staff, teachers, janitors, administration, et cetera. We also noticed here that what we've left down here is the surplus at the end of last year is 507. That 507 now I can reconcile. That 507 plus the 850 that went into our budget plus the 450 in CIP equals the $1.8 million that they showed in the audit report.
Okay.
That's where
Now we can sleep.
in other words, if you
Yes,
take
we
round
can.
numbers, 850 is in our budget, plus 450 here is 1.3 million, plus the 500 that's there, that's where we have the end up of the 1.8, which was in the audited. This number here was the unaudited surplus at the end of the year. So that's how it reconciles. So I can sleep at night, at least now I reconcile with these numbers
I
here.
have a question. What percentage is our surplus or our reserve with that, those numbers that they're talking about to have between 8.33?
You lost me.
That's,
Yeah, it's
It's
a
combined, it's
combined
combined.
number.
Our surplus at the end of the year that went into that town figure was 1.8 million. Of that 1.8 million, modified now, 850,000 went into this year's operating budget, okay? What we're saying now is we're looking to take an additional 450, which was the CIP closeout, to substitute for this reduction in revenue of 1.1 million from the state. And then all these other adjustments, we still have a 252,000 adjustment, which could come of one of two ways. We try to shrink operating expenses, we take an additional 2.2 out of the surplus line, or we get an adjustment through the town of some surplus level. But effectively, that's where we're down to right now, is we've already said in this sheet, identified the 450, which quote, was rolled into surplus this year, all else being equal. We're saying we're utilizing that 450, we still have a 250 breakage, assuming all these other numbers pan out, and there's a couple of solutions. Continue to figure out if we can reduce what positions or other things to reduce between now and June to come up with the 250. Take the 250 out of the 500 that's here, or work with it, figure out where within the town hall budget it is. But that's where we are for this year, and then once we can talk on that, to me, the 250 or any of these other is a small number relative to what we're looking at for next year's changes in budgets.
Thank you. Did you want to hand out that other paper at this point?
No questions on where we are at this point?
I just have a question.
Sure.
I-
Go right ahead.
I just got a little confused, I'm
Okay.
sorry. The 450, the CIP surplus bond funds, that's going, the idea here is that that's going to debt services, though. That's
Correct.
going to pay off that
Yeah,
debt.
which then says, quote, "The revenue that we've got from other areas just goes into the operating budget." It's kind of semantics because from a state, you have to have at least that amount of debt service, which we have, we can designate that towards the debt
But
service.
that doesn't go to the actual fixing of the budget.
No, what it does is it goes to just allocate, that's paying part of interest and bond principal as it makes.
In other words, what's going to happen is the money that they're talking about will go to the debt service. What's in the budget for debt service will now be freed up to
Freed up
go
to-
to
That's
pay
right.
other
Okay.
things in the school budget. So in effect, it's one hand is washing the other.
That's correct. But by statute or regulation, since it was voted for on a debt issue, then it goes towards debt, and we do have, obviously.
I just wanted to make sure
Right.
we weren't
No.
bonded money in.
No.
Right.
No, but I just want to make, it doesn't go to like reducing the bonds more than what was already in the amortization of the bonds for this fiscal year.
Brian?
I think that Carol and I talked the other day about obviously the GPA revenue being a significant issue. So we put this chart together just yesterday, and then by the time I could figure out how to use Excel to actually make it look somewhat presentable to you all, it was done about 3:30.
For the public, would you tell them what GPA is?
I'm sorry, general purpose aid, it's money from the state that flows towards to help offset the cost of local education. So I put this together to try to show where our GPA numbers have been, '08, '09, and then '10. And really, I would point you to 2010, which would be basically this budget year, where you can see that the green part at the top of the bar is basically stimulus money. And if that were not there, our revenue picture and even this budget year would be significantly worse. And the outlook, obviously, for FY '11 is unknown because the stimulus money may not be there.
Real quick, Brian, does this reflect the reduction that you guys were faced with
Yes.
a few months ago?
Yes, the 461 includes the reduction, the governor's curtailment,
The 1.1.
the 1.1.
So if you look, the original state aid, excluding Obama money, so to speak, was a slight reduction, but it was basically 4.6 plus 1.1 relative to the 6.2. So, and then that obviously, and that's what was in the budget as it was finalized last spring. And then it's been reduced by the 1.1. So this is the blue boxes quote from the state without stimulus money.
So if I remember right, 2010, it was about 5.7.
Right, 1.1 plus 4.6.
In '09 was, about 700 more, or 800 was taken off the table? So would it be about 7 million?
Right, because you'd have the return of the 781, which came back post curtailment. June 30th, basically, right.
Okay, now, what I thought we would do is have the town presentation, and then we'll open it for questions and discussion.
And we're going to get into 2011.
That's the
Yeah.
ultimate goal.
We had prepared an agenda, we seem to have jumped off that, but There's some revenue information here
Right,
as
we
well.
need to go over the town revenue information.
I'm not sure if we've talked about the school revenue either. Do you want to close out the school conversation on that? On that point?
Do you want to do that?
Oh, the pie charts.
And this is more just background information, what the sources of revenue are for the school and for the town. This is kind of a backdrop to the conversation. I had intended on the agenda that we start with this, but it's fine. So just to kind of round out the conversation, does the school want to present just those two pie charts and then we'll get into the town portion?
Brian, you want to do that?
Sure. The first one, which shows the local tax dollars, is basically a breakdown of where our revenue for FY10 comes from. The next page basically shows the breakdown of everything else, so that you can see it in a little bit more detail as the secondary revenue sources.
Do you want to go over it out loud so that people at home can hear it?
Sure. The first one, and the basic overall revenue, about 76% of the school department's revenue comes from local tax dollars, or about $26,771,000. State GPA is about $4.6 million, or 13%. ERA stabilization funds, which is the stimulus money, is about 1.2% of that, or 4%. The next one, the FY10 curtailment, the 1.1, which is 3% of our revenue, you would actually back that piece out. That's the revenue that's being lost. And then the FY09 surplus, which got rolled forward, is the 850, or is 2% of our revenue for this fiscal year. And then the other, which is about 1%, the 512,000, that's where you flip over to the next page. Secondary revenue sources is about 512,000, as I said. Of that, 61%, or 311,000, is state agency client reimbursement. We have Medicaid reimbursements of about 100,000, which is 19%. Adult ed fees, 13,000, about 3%. Facility rentals, gyms, auditorium, that type of thing, 11,000, or 2%. Community services daycare rental, 11,500, 2%. Community service transportation reimbursement, which is summer programs, they pay us to use our buses and whatnot. It's about $30,000, or 6%. We get a cable TV fee, $9,000, 2%. And then other miscellaneous revenues, $26,000, almost 27, 5%.
Thank you.
So this is just a 1% allocation?
I'm sorry.
Bottom chart is the allocation of that 1%.
I still couldn't hear you?
This chart here allocates the 1%.
Correct, correct.
Thank you.
I think it's a good segue just to turn to the simple pie chart for the town. This shows townwide revenues, including school in this analysis. Obviously, property tax revenue is nearly 60% of the revenue source for the entire town school operation. The other sources are state revenues, which we'll talk about in a moment, and that's a challenge that we have, not unlike the school. There's the educational revenue sources with GPA and other revenues, and I'll have to rely on Ruth if you want to know more about what makes up that 4% education revenues. I'm not sure if I can rattle that off the top of my head. We also have sizable excise tax revenues at the local level, as talked about earlier during the audit, and then municipal revenues. These are all sorts of, from community services, planning department. Again, this just shows it in a very aggregate format, so there's not much detail here, but just to get a sense of where the money comes from to fund the operation. So keep in mind, the 3% does come from the state revenues. There's a couple of different sources. One is, the chief one is municipal revenue sharing, where there are also smaller pockets of state money for specific purpose, road maintenance and those sorts of things. In your packet I sent around, I do have copies here. There's two sources that have been hit as part of the curtailment process. As regards state revenue sharing, our best estimate is we are standing to lose about $245,000, $46,000 from that source, and about $95,000 from the URIP program These are monies, again, for road maintenance. So, for discussion purposes, we are going to be short about $341,000 in expected revenue. This information is fairly new to us. The revenue sharing piece is about 10 days or 2 weeks old, so I've not put in place any specific curtailments, but certainly I'm ready to do so with this information. As we all know, the budget process was challenging last year. Our budget revenues, we'll be lucky to meet them, frankly, irrespective of this conversation, and we'll do our best certainly to keep budget on the expenditure side. So assuming that we make budget everywhere else, we know we have about $350,000 to deal with.
Tom, can I ask a question?
Certainly.
This curtailment that you're talking about is for this current fiscal year?
Yes, it is.
And we don't know yet any prediction at all for
We don't, but
next year.
I don't have any fantasy that our revenue sharing for next year will be anything more than the curtailed amount, if you will. I think-
Not going up.
I think that's probably a conversation or a prediction that can cross over into the education
Right.
subsidy as well. There's no guarantees.
Just the curtailment.
Well, yeah, we've been, the school will definitely, I mean, the commissioners of education already announced that the 011 curtailment will be in line, bigger than the existing one. There's no allocation to towns yet, they're still working on that, but the 11 will be greater next year than where it is now. Now, what is a difficult number, so we're looking at the existing 11 plus, a 11 plus something for next
They'd
year.
already, in the second year of the biennium for next year, they had already reduced GPA by 53 million, excuse me. And then in addition to that, the current supplemental budget that the governor has presented reduces that by a further 35 or 36 million. So the total reduction on GPA for next year is upwards of $80, $90 million spread around the state, but that certainly represents a significant reduction for us. If 38 represents $1 million for us,
Yeah, I mean, there is no exact number, but, you know, I'm looking at, the bunch of us went to a meeting with a commissioner, the superintendent last Monday, and not only is 11 a bad year, but 12 will be a worse year because the stimulus money, you know, there's a cliff effect. That's all gone unless something radically changes. But I'd say, you know, plus or minus several hundred thousand will probably be, you know, I'm looking at 1.4 million for next year, relative to, which is higher than the 1.1, unless there's massive changes in legislature, how they reallocate the funds. But clearly, the total reduction statewide is greater than where it is right now. So I don't have an exact, I don't think anybody, I know there's time periods, they're still
we
working
will
on it.
hopefully know by the end of the month what next year's draft GPA is going to be, based on the governor's curtailment.
What was it, so the 1.1 million, what was the total amount of it at the state level?
37, 38.
Yeah, 38 rounded.
So, in my simple head,
If you
if we
do,
go from 37 to
Yeah.
90, that's threefold. I would think that's, because formulas are fairly flat, that our curtailment could be as high as 3.3 million, if not.
Potentially.
more.
That's a cumulative, right?
potentially.
Yeah, we could easily be 3 million below.
I heard you say 37, 38 to 53.
That's 37 for this year. For next year, they had already reduced the GPA when they voted the biennium budget last spring. Next year's GPA was already $53 million less than what this year's was, without any kind of curtailment. It wasn't even, that was based on
That's where
those
Sean's come
projections
up
at
with a
that
90.
time.
Yeah.
So we were already starting out for next year, $53 million less. So now on top of that, they're going to put another 36, potentially, depending on what the legislature does.
So that's where we get to, like a
That's-
$2.5 to $3 million
that's the
Yeah, I
easily.
follow you now.
It's not pretty.
So,
Yeah.
not unlike the list of budget cuts, and in your case, there were some revenue sources you were able to find to plug the hole this current year. I don't have those revenue sources, so I'm looking to take that out of the expenditure side of the budget. And to date, I have instituted a number of fairly predictable spending controls. I need to quantify those so I can have some degree of certainty that we're going to be able to make budget. And Ruth and I are prepared to issue a directive out to staff that will give them a dollar figure that they must reduce their budgets by, and try to be as fair with that process and have the request of the departments is relative to their percentage of the overall budget. So the larger budgets, as you would expect, it will have to take out more. So that's going to be a challenge, and that's going to be something my staff's working through over the next couple of weeks. At the same time, they're preparing the budget for next year.
Curiosity on your revenue side, on the 4.3 million excise tax, did cash for clunkers probably just got us back where we were, or did, I guess I'm just curious, because obviously that's a big number on the town side, and not knowing the cash for clunkers, but do we expect it will even come close to the 4.3?
I don't think that's probably a good mix for many companies in Scarborough.
Yeah, we have not seen a huge increase in excise. We're tracking on budget. That budget was reduced fairly significantly from the year before.
Okay,
So,
so we're not like $1 million shy on excise?
no, we're at budget, but there's not much room for error.
Right, okay.
That's a point that we need to be very close to.
So Sean, you didn't cash in your clunker?
I did.
So I'm confident on the town side, we'll be able to deal with our $350,000 problem. I heard mentioned earlier, one of the options, and I'm not sure if it was a request of the town to perhaps come up with $252,000 more in cuts. I guess I need to be clear on that point. And the sooner I know that from the town council, the better, for sure.
Well, going back to our agenda, it looks like we had moved on to item 7, discussion of strategies to address the curtailment. And then also, we will move into,
That's
Well-
item 6, Carol.
right, item 6, I'm sorry. And then work on what we want to suggest for the next fiscal year. So I'm opening it to discussion. Counselor Babine and then Counselor Wood.
So I want to kind of break at least my questions or comments into two parts. One is around the schools first, and then it's really, I want to make sure I understand the numbers right. The shortfall, not including budget overruns, really looking for about $95,000 that needs to get hit down. Because the 160 that was at the bottom, you really don't know whether that's a final number or if it could grow or even be less by the end of the year, correct?
Well, as I said, we walked down through, some of these are more concrete numbers, some have ranges around them. So I don't think the shortfalls in those accounts, probably be shortfalls, there's a range around those numbers, just like the excess has a range around those numbers. So, so yes, I agree with you. These will be shortfalls. Will they be 160? Will they be 140? Will they be 170? Hard to say. I don't think they'll be down to 0, nor do I think they'll, come at a higher number. Each one of these, and we're going to be tracking, when we close out, well, I guess we'll be closing out second quarter, updating all these. But some of these are pretty like black and white, the teacher piece.
Right.
That's known.
Well, so the reason why I'm asking it in that framework is that, and this goes even on the town side, is that we don't really know where the number is going to be, so we can't do the adjustment until the end of the year. Correct? Because you're going to be directing your staff to make some type of operational change, and we need to see what the impact of that is before we say, okay, we're going to approve an extra $250,000. Because you may not need the $250,000 because you're able to find it all, or $400,000, you're able to find it all within, your management role. Correct.
Right.
And it's the same on the school side, that 160.
Knowing this mid-budget year,
I'm not sure if I should say the 160, Sean, but it's the same for this whole pot of money, yes. Some are concrete, some are not concrete.
I'm not concerned about overspending my budget, knowing this mid-year, we can make the correction to stay within budget. So for my purposes, I'm dealing with a $350,000 revenue shortfall that I need to deal with. How
And
confident
you're
this...
going to find that within your,
Yes.
there's no request for the town council for additional funds.
No, I'm confident we can tighten the belt to make that happen within the operating budget.
So therefore, we're only dealing with the $252,000 of the schools, based on the presentation, right?
As you could look at it, correct.
Somewhere around there,
Right,
yeah.
correct.
Sounds like to me.
Right.
So, Counselor, do you want to ask something more, Sean?
No,
I mean,
I've already got a solution.
Okay, Counselor Wood?
Well, you could save us a lot of time.
Well, at least it's my solution. My understanding is that when we went through our budget process, that we underestimated tax valuation, property valuation by about $8 million, and that contributed an extra $250,000 to $400,000 in revenues that's in the general fund. It's undesignated. Given the amount, I think, and this, the uncertainty of why we're here, to me, it's very simple that you take that amount and use it for the schools. We still have to deal with the problem that's going to happen after that, but at least it solves a $252,000 problem that we have now. And I'm kind of short as far as my response, because I don't look at 252,000 and say, based on our total budget, it's not a lot of money to be really talking about from that perspective. And we did underestimate tax revenue, so why not use it for the schools?
Okay, there's one suggestion. Counselor Wood?
However, based on what Tom's telling us, and tell me if I'm wrong here, Tom, is that although you're projecting a roughly $350,000 revenue shortfall.
That's fact, that's not a projection.
All right,
That is fact.
that's fact, but isn't that based on our hope and prayer that the rest of the revenue lines are coming close to what was budgeted?
It is, and I run some peril by being
Right.
confident that we'll track continuing through the year and we'll make budget. I think the Finance Committee and the Council was appropriately conservative on many of those revenue estimates. Again, we're going to come in right at the number. It's not one of those years where there's lots of excess revenue. But we're fairly confident we'll get there.
Because,
I may have to come back to you in 3 months, and I promise the Finance Committee to show monthly financial reports, so we'll all be seeing this stuff in real time and know whether we're
what is our recourse if we commit $250,000 to the school side, and then we find ourselves actually in the same situation?
Well, the Councilor is correct. That money was not budgeted, and it appears in our budget in the overlay line. If it is unexpended, it becomes fund balance. That's what happens. So theoretically, that money is not spoken for. It's not required to fund the operations of the school in the town.
But if I can tag on, but to your point, Mike, is that you'd have to look at using the existing fund balance, funds from the fund balance. So I'm saying use the 250 because that was unbudgeted for the schools, and if we had in a month, 2 months, or at the end of the year, even though it's 250, you have to take it. You either have to take it out of the general fund designated, or you're going to have to raise taxes. And
Well,
You can't
the
raise
second
that.
is not an option.
yeah, we couldn't do that.
It gets a little complicated. Please recall, you approve a budget by the end of June. The
Right.
assessor doesn't commit taxes until August.
We should change that.
That amount of overlay is really beyond the council's control. It is what it is. We put an amount in there for the budget, but it is what it is as a result of the tax rate and ultimately the proceeds of the town, tax proceeds. So that money is in the budget. It's not designated to do anything with it. I had some ideas to spend some of it.
Yeah, I imagine. Well, $20,000 on fixing an elevator, maybe. But, yeah, and that was not, and I know no one's saying otherwise. I mean, that, we were very conscious of the fact, hopeful, that our townwide evaluation would come in a little bit more than it actually did, or actually that we had budgeted for.
Right.
So I'm thankful that it ended up working the way it did. We're not so confident that next year will be the same story, so.
I should just clarify, the overlay account, the purpose it serves is that throughout the course of the year, residents have abatements to their property, the values are wrong, so once taxes are committed, the assessor, through a process, can make adjustments. In some cases, monies are not realized, in other cases, there are supplements. That abatement account is is where that money comes from. We had budgeted something in the order of $68,000 for that purpose, and I still think we'll need that much as a matter of course, because of the revised value. We have something in the order of $260,000 in that account. So there's about 190 available.
Just to,
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Continue.
For the school and town side, I mean, we have projects, CIP projects that we, like replacement programs, if you will, which can be represent large expenditures. I mean, have we looked at maybe foregoing a replacement of a large vehicle, if you will, or a major HVAC upgrade, and et cetera, et cetera? I know that there's always that other argument about maintenance issues and everything else, but it seems to me that this town has been wise and careful in replacing their major components and pieces of their infrastructure with new. Maybe that foresight can pay off by having us forego that kind of aggressive schedule.
There's no question, those sorts of decisions will be made at the department level. When I give them a target, a dollar figure to take out of their budgets, I suspect those sorts of things will be the first they look at. So if you're asking me if there's other opportunities there, I think that's going to be consumed by our own challenge, our revenue shortfall challenge.
And does the school see similar opportunities?
The bulk of our CIP stuff is done over the summer when the kids aren't here, so that would be in the next cycle, actually. We did all, the vast majority of our CIP work, roofs, et cetera, wiring updates in last summer. So there's really nothing out there.
So there really is nothing more to
No,
look at.
that's not gonna help.
And I certainly wouldn't even believe for a second that I'm seeing something here after you've many months and hours of exhaustive work to find more money. The only other quick question I have is I've heard it said often, not only verbally, but also on paper, about how fortuitous the school found themselves in the foresight that Mr. Justice apparently had in locking in on a natural gas contract. I mean, it's spoken about as, and rightfully so, certainly, that it was a fortunate move on his part. Is transportation and fuel, does that offer similar opportunities where you can buy
We get it
that
through Public Works.
at long-range contract?
We got our gas for the buses at Public Works.
Okay. So is that
Prices
what-
are better than they were a year ago, and those counts look like they're trending in the right direction. But we've got to, fingers crossed. Curtailing field trips and those kinds of things has helped save funds in transportation, but
So I'm looking at
gas
this,
market is
I'm looking at
volatile.
this piece of paper that's put together by the school. So how's it work? Do we contract and we purchase the fuel and then the school buys it from us?
And we pay for...
that's part of
for
one of the ways the town
mechanics
saves
and-
money overall,
Right.
by having work done by Public Works at a reasonable rate, not as an exorbitant rate that we'd have to pay if we went out to a private sector.
Maybe part of the reason why we keep our cost per pupil.
That's
priced
one of
down,
the things that contributes to it.
Collaboratively together. All right, thanks. I don't want to dominate that.
Counselor Holbrook.
Well, I just had a question about, could this possibly, some of these use of discretionary spending, for example, I mean, this could possibly, potentially be a larger amount. And I'm wondering, because as an example, I have two children in the school system. I recently paid $15, if you will, for one of my children to take 3 field trips for this upcoming year. So I was wondering if maybe, if we could again kind of look at some of those and say, well, do we need all 3 right now with what we've got? I mean, could there still be some more? I know they're pennies in the grand scheme of things.
We've really
but-
put a limit on the range of field trips. Unless it's funded by an outside group, if it's funded by the school department, they can't go further than 10 miles. So that saves significantly on cost of transportation of students. We ask staff to look for other kinds of experiences that might be substituted for those kinds of activities.
Can I, but
Yeah.
just quickly, that number, we've been working on this spreadsheet really since November, and the Finance Committee raised that number, the total curtailed spending, to 250 last week. So, I think we're pushing that pretty far, that envelope, to get to this 1.1 million.
I guess we were 200. Yeah, you gotta remember the miscellaneous things, a lot of stuff is purchased, obviously, at the beginning of the school year. So the remaining expenditures, there isn't that big a pot, and most of them have been said, it's gotta go to a high-level man if you're gonna do it. It's very small amounts, so I'd have to say there's probably not a whole lot, but yes, because it'd be 251,000 potentially. But there's a small pot because, again, out of all these other items, a lot of those supplies and everything else obviously purchased at the beginning before the school year. So
The 250 represents more than half of what was left when we instituted the freeze. We had about 413,000 at the end of November, at which point we froze accounts, divvied up the difference between 200 and 413, and then subsequent to that, the Finance Committee has moved that to 250. So we're not talking about, compared to the entire budget, a significant amount of money at this point.
It seems to me that, the school has a set of strategies to deal with the problem. Most of it, I believe the town will follow suit and have its own set of strategies. I'm not sure if a decision has to be made. There should be some comfort around this table that there's surplus money, failing anything else, that could be used. There's also potentially other money in excess tax receipts. Are you here tonight asking for a definitive answer as to where we plug that hole, or just apprising us of the situation?
No, we're just basically apprising of the situation.
It just seems to me as we move forward, we'll be able to track these numbers, and they'll be more finite with the passing day.
yeah, I mean, my
Mr.
comment on that
Mitchell.
is, and I've told people, my view, this is not the school of Scarborough or the municipal of Scarborough, this is the town of Scarborough. So I'm here to make sure that everybody understands as best of where both sides are, and not only the 2010 budget, which I think is like Tom says, both sides have tried to reduce as much as possible. There's still surplus funds or other thing. It's to get together and work as a municipality to figure out what we're going to do in 2011 and 2012, because trust me, 2011 and 12 makes this look like, nothing. And so, yes, different people, but I'm more of education, make sure everybody's on the same page.
Counselor Roy and then Counselor Alquist. And then Counselor Baybine.
Exactly the same line, and as I hear the comments, and I'm certain we need to look for every penny, because pennies do add up to dollars, where we can, but not be so stringent, looking at, where we can pick at it this year. We have to look at the subsequent years. Look at CIP things. If we curtail, let's say, paving of the roads, that we allot $250,000 a year for paving of roads, it eventually will come back to bite us. So we have to be really careful, and we have to really look out there to the future and be solid in our plan and understand that we may save the dollars today, but in 2012, it may cost us twice as much for something to be done because the degradation that's happened, or the same with equipment. It may mean the safety or the health and well-being of one of our residents or a group of our residents if they don't have the proper equipment to take care of things. So I caution everybody to think as judiciously as they can, but also to be retrospective in their thought process, because it can make a big difference down the road. Counselor Alquist, can you put the microphone there so the audience can hear you?
I appreciate us getting together and trying to figure out what's going on here in the last few months of the current budget before we jump into the big pool, I guess. But, I have complete confidence in the town manager and certainly the school department that they can come up and find things that we can do from here to the end, and they'll be creative about that, and they'll keep us informed, which I appreciate. I certainly, I had a little fear going on there for a minute that we were going to sit around the table and start telling them giving them direction on where we want to make these reductions. I just feel just sitting down and going over the figures and looking at each other is very helpful, and I have complete confidence in Mr. Doyle certainly and Mr. Hall to do their jobs and get us through this part of it, maybe the easy part of it, before we get to the big bad part of it. So I appreciate sitting down with you folks.
Counselor Baybine.
Ronnie said it.
Oh, hey, great. Mrs. Perry. Ms. Perry.
As we move forward, I just want to give you some, excuse me, please, some information. Your employees, our employees, town employees received no increase in wages this year. We're trying to negotiate a contract with our professional staff, with all of our staff, actually. And when you look at our professional staff, our teachers, they are the lowest paid in the area by, what is it, the percentage? At least 3% from top to bottom in all categories. Even if we gave them a 3% raise, which is not likely, they would still be in the bottom of the pack in the area. And I'm talking Sad-Six, South Portland, Westbrook, Yarmouth, Falmouth, Cape Elizabeth. We did not compare to Portland. We never compare to Portland. I just want you to keep that in mind. We were the first district that required our staff to pay part of their health insurance. We were the first district to have 5 days. Our teachers work 5 days beyond what is required of the state, and our children go 2 days, 3 days beyond what is required by the state, because we believe in that extra time for our students. So this is something else that we're facing as we face the budget shortfalls. And I know you're facing the same thing because you delayed, we said straight out no raises. So I don't know what that's going to do for us. It's not helping us at the moment, but we're still trying to negotiate with our employees, as I'm certain you are. So not going to be easy.
Anybody else? Well, are you sure? Going? Counselor Wood, you need the microphone, Mike, though.
You do.
Do I? All right. I just want to make sure that no one misheard me. I think, I'm going to have a hard time looking at a citizen saying we're going to replace a $300,000 pumper truck when the one that we have can go another year or two. If in the analysis that Mr. Hall will make, and certainly Mr. Doyle, where public safety is compromised, then we're not going to go down that route. But, if we can delay spending $400,000 to put a skim coat on a secondary road, and in our professional determination, that action will not seriously degrade the structure or compromise public safety, I think we need to look at that kind of stuff. So, and I'm sure this council will do that. So I too echo Councilor Alcor's words. I think it's very beneficial to get together in this manner, and I have a lot of confidence and that everyone at this table is going to do the right thing and continue to move this town forward in its most difficult time in memory as far as
Okay.
the finances go. So,
Okay.
thank you.
I
Thank you.
just want to move us along to the more long-range issue of 2011, and thoughts, suggestions, panic, whatever you want to call it, that we all might be experiencing on both ends of this issue. We heard from the school department, the range of their problem could be pretty darn high. Let's hope that it's not that bad, but I guess they say hope springs eternal, but it isn't always realized. And we also recognize that our own revenue sharing and income will be affected in the next couple of years as well, at least to the level it is now, if not more. Every time the state seems to get together, we feel a hit. So, and they're in session now, so who knows? So I think we need to start a discussion about 2011. I'm going to start with Mr. Brownsey and then
Well, I just
Mr.
want
Mitchell
to point out a couple
and
things that,
Mr. Council Babine.
Sure. The revenue for next year, fiscal year 11, and we started to talk about it. I mean, the way I look at it, Bob outlined the numbers. We're talking about cumulative cuts from the state and the governor's proposed budget as it stands now, which is really another, 1.1 to 1.5 million. Those are my numbers. So that would bring us down, if you look at this chart, if you add them together, we're 6.6, we're 7.1, then we're 5.9, then we could be down to like 4.5 to 5, we could be in there. Those are pretty big, that's a pretty big decrease. The way the state formula works now, you might have noticed this when it came out a couple months ago, us and the communities around us take the hit, the majority of the hit on these state GPA cuts because of the way our valuation works in the formula. And it actually hurts us that our valuation is growing still. I mean, it's slowed, as we're kind of getting double whammy, it's slowed, but it's still growing a little bit compared to the state, so it's actually hurting us. So we need to be heard with our reps in Augusta, too, that if the same formula is used again, it's going to be us and the surrounding districts that are going to take the majority of these changes. So, we have to work with you, but we also have to be heard about what's happening, because this will be tough, really tough to absorb. I mean, what we did this year was really to spare staff, but, we've kind of taken from everything now. And then what happens for next year if we have to absorb more? And, and property tax is the same thing, we're going to hear from the public about that too. So there's a lot to consider.
Correct. Mr. Mitchell?
I just, information, want to update the council, which you might have heard. The Finance Committee in the last 3 weeks has met 3 different times, not only on this year, but setting for next year. And then we announced at the last board meeting, as we start our 011 budget process, that we're looking for initial pass. The superintendent, working with administration, brings forward to the Finance Committee, as it was announced in the last board meeting, a budget for next year of 1.5 million less than the current year's budget. That's our starting point to even start talking. Now I want to give you the bad news. That's 1.5, and just a little bit of history. Our operating budget this year, as approved, was 35.1. Last year was 30. It was 50,000 change from last year. So this year's budget, the expense side, is 35.94. Last year it was 35.44, $50,000 increase. We're saying that we're looking for $1.5 million as a starting with the Finance Committee, then ultimately we go to the board. And now, my numbers, if you take $1.5 million reduction, which is obviously, compared to history, that's a big number to start with. Assuming the various miscellaneous items that Brian has outlined, outside of the GPA stays relatively the same, the small pieces of revenue. Assuming that the curtailment is 1.4 million next year relative to 1.1 million this year, we have another dilemma. In current budget, we had 850,000 we talked about that was in surplus to kind of fund the budget. Next year, we're talking about, if you go back to this number here, the 507.
Yeah.
If we use the 250, we'll only have 250, and I said, let's say we have 350. So at the end of the day, we have a little extra surplus out of there. That's a $500,000 difference from what was in this year's budget. 850 less 350, that's 500. The total of that, so with a $1.5 million reduction in our budget, if that was what ultimately went through, let's say, and the GPA was 1.4 million reduction, which is in the range, that would mean a $1.5 million revenue shortfall that would be from a tax basis. So that's obviously a big issue. And again, it's simple math. There's 1.1 this year in curtailment, plus 1.4, plus or minus some numbers for next year. That's 2.5 million. Less surplus adjustment went into this budget last year is only about $500,000 drop. That's $3 million. If we cut our budget by $1.5 million, that still leaves $1.5 million shortfall. So I just want to make the council aware and the public aware that we're starting the process at $1.5 million reduction. I know every budget year that I was on the board years ago, people would say, well, cuts where you had an increase. This is not increasing anything. This is, instead of a 35.1, we're saying let's start with a $33.6 million budget. But that still leaves obviously a big shortfall. So I just want to, and I don't have a solution to that yet.
Yeah. Mr. Baywine was first, and then you, Ronnie. Okay, Ronnie, he's going to let you go first. A comes before B.
I understand how severe the problem is. I think we all do, and we certainly are trying to relay that to the public so they understand how bad it is. I suspect we're going to have to do things that we've never done before. We're going to have to think outside the box, so to speak, and I'm talking whether it's larger class sizes, whether it's furlough days, whether it's more in health insurance. I'm not suggesting that. I'm just saying, if you look around the state and you look what people do, and on the municipal side, they're going to be doing more, maybe cross-training, whatever. We got to get creative. We all understand what the problem is now, and there's big solutions that are going to be, that have to be dealt with here. You know, I talk with people who think we're going to hold on to what we got, and that's their mission. You know, we can hold on to what we got, and here's how we're going to do it. It's not that at all. You know, it's called, I think we're in the survival mode. And both sides, school side and the municipal side, we got to figure out how we're going to survive. We certainly, whether you say, you know, we're the lowest paid teachers or whatever, the fact of the matter is, those are still good jobs, and we have still good jobs in the town of Scarborough for our employees, and we treat them well. They have good benefits, and we appreciate what they do. But this is more than belt tightening. This is serious stuff, and I feel very confident, again, I say this over and over, but I feel very confident with the staff that we have and the people sitting here that's going to have to make the decisions, and our hired people, that we can accomplish that. And I certainly want to relay to the public that we all are up to the challenge. I mean, it's going to be tough, but this is a pretty tough crowd, and I want to reassure them that we will do the best, whatever it takes, whether it's taxes, whether it's furlough, whatever it is. When at the end of the day, I think we'll all be satisfied that we did our best and we tried our hardest to make this Scarborough still the best place around.
Councilor Babine, you keep doing that.
Ronnie speaks so well.
He does.
Mrs. Stasko.
Thank you. I appreciate everybody's efforts here this evening, and I do agree that collectively that we hopefully will solve our problems. And maybe we can start tonight about talking about areas of consolidation. I think that there's probably still areas right within our own boundaries here that maybe we can consolidate services, positions, ways that, you know, which would allow us to work together as one unit. So that's something that we talk about a lot. We also talk about doing that with other communities, and we'll be very open with you. Educators come to the board, and I'll take this from Monique Culberson. They want to, you know, see what they can get instead of give. And it is a shame, and you've probably heard me speak publicly. I mean, my philosophy is consolidating much greater than what was needed for education throughout the state. And I'll do what I can to continue to talk about that, because there really is no reason for 3,000 kids here, 2,500 here, 1,400 there, to be working as all separate entities. And I think over time, educators and leaders will come to realize that. I think we all just need to think about how do we want our schools and services for town to really look. How can we trim things? What can we do without? Can we tighten, you know, and realize that we might have to give things up, certainly reduce or delay? We certainly did that over the last couple of years. We, I think, piloted a math program for 3.5 years before we finally implemented it, even though we saw our data flatline and decline for several years. So we're certainly not new to doing that, and I know we will be able to do that. But we do want to, at the same time, try to keep our education where we're at and continue. I don't see any reason why we can't continue to grow and move student achievement, even in tight times. That's where you really have to think as a collective group. We need strong leadership to do that. We need educators that are really keeping that student achievement in the forefront as a laser focus. And I think that's what our community wants. We also want well-rounded education with extracurricular and so on and so forth. So there's going to be a lot of heated discussion. You all probably know that's coming, because as we trim, it's going to really upset folks. And I just think that the more the public understands that we want to keep the best education we can for Scarborough kids here in these tight times.
Brian, did you want to speak? Did I see your hand up? Anybody else? Councilor Babine.
Yeah, so I wanted to, I concur with everyone about the direction that we need to go, and it's definitely going to require a significant change in operation, both, I think, more so on the school side, But I do think that there is definitely opportunity on the town side to look at some of its best practices that it's had in the past, whether it's the vehicle replacement program that we have, and maybe tightening that up so that we don't have as many vehicles. There's different things, and we can talk about that in our own finance committee. But I think that, as Ms. Perry brought up, the number one issue I think that's going to drive any type of budget going forward is our employee contracts. And I think that we're all concerned in making sure that our employees are treated fairly. Because to me, it would be very difficult to look at a municipal employee being on the town side in the face and ask them not to forego another raise, if on the school side, the schools have contracted and given their professional staff a 3% raise, or a 6%, or whatever the number might eventually be. It's a driver as part of both sides, as far as the fairness piece. And right now, there is a lot of questions out there about the direction that the school is going, and is that going to get resolved so that we can then know how we're going to proceed on the town side. It's kind of the shuffle game, and because they're our number one asset, no matter what service that they provide. So we need to come to a solution around both of those areas, meaning the school and the town employees.
Ms. Perry?
I think tonight has been productive. And I think for us to move forward, we're going to have to do this, whether it's just chairs and department heads, I don't know, but I think we have to continue to talk as we prepare our budgets and work together for economies. I think, as Colleen said, there may be some economies that we can achieve if we work together. And we are one town. And the school department represents the town well. Our students perform well, and we want to continue that. And I know you want to continue that. But I also want the fire truck there if my house is on fire. And I want that policeman to stop that person who's speeding on Route 1, or the kids who are smoking pot down behind the library. That has to continue, and we have to pay for that. I don't know if that happens, but it has. I've been told it happens.
They are smoking pot.
I've been told it happens.
Up on the river.
Oh, up on the river, I don't know.
Now I know where to find Jackie in the after-school hours.
But, we can do a lot together,
Everywhere.
and we don't accomplish much when we're not on the same page. And I thank you for your efforts to bring us all together.
Councilor Alquist?
One last comment. Thanks for those comments, Jackie. They were good. I hope anything we do and anything we base, our figures on, when we move forward, we don't do it anticipating that Augusta's going to change the formula or they're going to change things for us. We need to make our actions we need to play the hand that's dealt us and not what we think it's going to be or should be, because we're going to fall behind if we do that. It's my only comment.
I think, I think we're close to summing up, perhaps. Just a couple of things I got out of this meeting tonight that I will kind of reiterate. One is that I think we do have tonight an understanding of the size of the problem and what faces us in the future. Number two, I think we want to continue some kind of dialogue among the two boards. And number three, I think we all know that whatever we do, we're going to do with the best of intentions, but people are not always going to be happy with the solution. There's going to be shared pain for all of us. And we're not looking to make winners and losers. We're trying to make our town be functional during a difficult period. There's always a new day. This too shall pass, but we have to get through this hard spot. And we're really, in our whole nation, having a new economy be born. So things are going to be different, and we have to deal with that. I think, just what Ronnie said, we have to work with the hand that's dealt us. The other thing I heard, too, is I think it's important that perhaps we schedule a meeting with our legislative delegation, at least to inform them in some way of our concerns, so that they are well-informed in their actions up in Augusta on our behalf. I'm not suggesting that they're not well-informed, but I think hearing from us about the
specific.
So specifics can only help them in that fight that they're gonna wage for us up in Augusta. And if anyone wants to add anything else that I might have overlooked in summing up the meeting, then we do have, it is only 8:05, so if there's any citizens from the audience who would like to speak, and remember, we're not looking for specifics, cuts tonight, we're looking for questions to clarify the problem. So we don't have a microphone up at the podium, but I think if you want to come over by Colleen and speak, we can kind of get that microphone over there if anyone would like to. Oops. I can come over to that microphone.
Get right out of there.
Yeah.
I really don't need a microphone.
Whoops.
Sorry, I didn't mean to scare you. It seems as though Bruce Bell, 13 West Beach Road, Scarborough.
Thank you.
Seems though I was at that podium March of last year talking about budgets and the $781,000 shortfall that you were dealing with then, and I think I said that you probably are going to be facing one well over $1 million coming this next year. Go back and look at the tapes if you want to. I'd be surprised if you're not looking at one that's going to be in the $2 million one next year. Scary, scary. But I got to speak for a whole different group of people. I'm retired. My parents are retired. And there's a lot of retired people in this town. I got no increase this year in income. I don't look for one next year. In fact, my retirement's Main State retirement, same as the teachers. And the teachers that are retired that live in the town of Scarborough, as well as myself right now, will not see another raise until the general product, the GPA, increases 1.4%. Because this is the first time in history that that amount has gone into the minus side. So really, if the legislature hadn't voted this year to hold the line with those retirements, I would have taken a 1.4% reduction, as well as all the retired school teachers that live in this town. My Social Security went up. My supplemental insurance went up. My Medicare D plan went up. And I won't even talk about all the other things that have gone up, as you all well know. You've got a lot of people in this town that are looking to you to manage this town and do the best job you can and look out for their best interest. And it's not going to be easy for the next couple of years. You're going to have to buckle up, get down and dirty and get this problem solved and look out for the interest of everybody in this town. One item that bothers me, but I don't see any resolve, the $450 million, $50,000 CIP surplus. If any of those CIP bonded monies, which now are surplus, were bonded for 20 years, they could be now in the 15th year left to be paid. That surplus that we're going to use to move over, that means that a kid that's entering school this year at 6 years old is going to be paying, or our parents will be, until he's 21. That money is going to be paid for. And it's going to have to be paid for with interest, okay? And we don't want to, just treat that lightly. It's a true fact. That's bonded money that's going to have to be paid by these same taxpayers that I just got through talking about, that are scared to death about what's going to happen tomorrow. They really are. And if you don't believe me, go out and start talking with some of them. I know my own parents, one of the two, is in a nursing home, and they just got an increase, and they're just under $9,000 a month. Where the heck is that money going to come from? It's scary. So, you got a big challenge ahead of you. Put your work clothes on and get to work.
Thank you, Mr. Bell. Anybody else from the audience? Sure. Oh, I got
Bruce?
another, yeah.
Thank you. And Ruth can correct me on that. The CIP, most of those are all what I would call more smaller, shorter term. It's not like the school, which is obviously bonded very long-term or big equipment. So most of those, I agree with you. There's still expenditures there in the budget, but they're more shorter term, so it's not a 20-year. But there's clearly, the money was out bonded and we'll be paying it back, but most of the stuff we're talking about is all
Paying off the deficit.
2 to 5 year, short stuff.
There's a lot in there that I talked with Ruth myself, and Ruth,
Yeah, but I agree
we
with the
talked about
concept.
this, and we talked about the different ones, and some of them could be up to.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Bell. If you could give your name and address.
My name is Marty Brown. I live at 3 Carriage Way.
Thank you.
I'm here, I guess, to represent the booster community in Scarborough. Deeply involved in more so football than any of the other activities.
I see from your sweatshirt.
I volunteer. I try to represent as best I can. So I also do some volunteering with a couple other sports, lacrosse and a few others. So anyway, I not so much questions, but just a request. I know there's recently we've become a sports done right community. With that came a few rules, regulations that makes, I guess we've done away with the registration fees and things like that. And as you guys move through the process, I know you'll look at everything that's on the table. But we have a really strong booster community in Scarborough. There's a lot of moms and dads that work hard. Some of the regulations, they kind of, you can't fundraise from now to then. You can't make a fundraiser a mandatory fundraiser. You can't charge a registration fee. There's a lot of those kinds of things that if you would be willing to look at those, it might kind of take the handcuffs off of some of the booster groups to really get down and get to work and roll up their sleeves and
Can you tell me
work
what kind
hard.
of a community that was again? I didn't quite hear that.
Sports Done Right?
Sports Done Right.
Sports Done Right brought some implications with it. I mean, I think it's,
And board policies that we did around.
Right, and there are some things, and I think, there are a few things that happen inside the booster communities that maybe brought a few rules about, and I think a lot of that stuff's been corrected. And I do know, I think the approval process that we go through, we make a request of a fundraiser, and the school looks at it, and it becomes approved by the superintendent or by the principal, the AD. I think those kinds of things are good, but, it's hard to, if you make a fundraiser optional, just speaking from experience, if you make a fundraiser optional, most people will opt out. They'd rather just pay you and not fundraise. So those kinds of things, if it's an optional fundraiser, we handed out clink bags this year in the football program from 2nd grade all the way to the 12th grade, not mandatory. If every bag would have been mandatory, we would have made $200. It wasn't, we brought in $700. So those kinds of things. I mean, if I do realize that I trust you guys to look at all the things on the table, but those kinds of things, those kinds of rules, if a few of those were lifted, I think we could all do, as a community, I think we could all do a really good job. So I just wanted to say that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brown.
Thanks.
Anyone else? Well, I want to thank you all for coming. I think we'll be sitting around the table with each other again, probably in the not-too-distant future, as we tackle these budget issues. And with that, I will accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All those in favor? I put you down as second, Sean. That's true. But we are anyway. I'm adjourning.
That's yours, right?